All right, in this presentation we're going to take a look at how while loops work. A while loop is going to execute a set of statements while the condition is true. So another way of looking at it is this. A condition-controlled loop causes statements to repeat as long as the condition is going to be, well, as we know, true. So then a while statement is written as a conditional controlled loop. All right, so all that is cool. So let's take a look to see what is required with this in a flowchart. So depending on how we create the loop, we may need some kind of initiation statement. Let's say maybe we need something like x is equal to 0 or something along those lines. And then we have our test expression, and we could say that, while x is less than 10, perform these particular tasks. So that's why we need to have some kind of initiation statement or initial statement. So while the test expression is true, then it's going to execute a body of whatever in that particular indentation. And generally speaking, if we have something that we initialized, we may need to update that particular variable so it's able to continue with the loop until the loop then is going to be false by the test expression. Then it exits out of the loop, and then from there it continues statements thereafter. So again, the syntax is going to be simple. We have the while keyword, and then we have some kind of test expression, and that test expression, going back to last class, is going to be either true or a false expression. So obviously if it's going to be true, that means everything that's going to be underneath it is going to be executed. So a simple while loop example. So we count, set that as 0, while count is less than 3, print count. Python is great, so we're incrementing every time we go through, and then we're adding this, so we're able to increment the value of count. So as it goes through, this will print 3 times. Python is great, Python is great, Python is great, and then it exits out of the loop. Now another way of doing this, so this was our original increment syntax. A little bit of a better way and kind of a shortcut way of doing that. We're going to utilize count because that's the variable that we want to increment. We do plus equals 1, and that will also increment the same as this. So you notice it's just a little bit shorter and a little bit sleeker to increment the value. All right, so let's look at the code. So we have our initial statement, num is equal to 0, so we're setting a variable. Then while num, and we're utilizing not equal to max num plus 1. All right, so this is going to be at the start of our variable. And here's going to be our execution statements. So print max num is num. So that's going to be our values, because right now this would be then at 0. We're going to increment this value. This would be the end of the loop, and then this would be printed outside of the loop. And this particular variable, it might be somewhere that we have another aspect of code somewhere else. So when this condition then is false, then this no longer gets executed. And that is it, and we'll take a look at a 5-minute code lab that we'll do. Alrighty, I'm going to cover some elements in 5-minute code lab 5C utilizing the while loops. And if we take a look at what we have in store, so there's going to be 2 problems. First one is to prompt the user to enter a number and print all the numbers leading up to the user's number. So for example, enter a number, user entered 19, and then display a list of numbers that the user, up to the user's number. So let's take a look at the code, and I've highlighted everything that we need to write in here, so it's just a couple lines of code. So if we take a look at problem number 1, create a variable for the initial value. So we're going to do something along the lines of this. So we set num1 to 0 for our initial value. Get rid of some spaces here. And then create a prompt to enter a number, and this will be max num is going to be the integer because we want a number, and input enter a number less than 20. So that's the user prompt. Let me get rid of some additional spaces here. Then we're going to create a while loop to print the number up to that user's number, and that will be utilizing the while statement while num1 is not equal to max num. So it's basically, so we're utilizing this particular syntax to increase num1 to get to max number. And then we'll come down here, we'll get rid of some of these additional spaces. Then we have one more statement, a print statement, which is going to be outside the loop. And now let's go ahead and run the code and see how it looks. Let me move this over here. Let's take a look at how it runs. So enter a number less than 20. So let's do 10. And you notice that it prints out, but we have a slight little problem. So we need to make a modification. Enter a number less than 20, so we entered 10. Current number, it did print out 10 values from 0 to 9, but if we wanted a 10, we need to make an update to the syntax. So there's one of two ways of doing it. Coming up over here, this is the while loop. So we'll change the syntax a little bit and increment this by +1. So we'll do that, +1. Let's clear the screen and then start over here, and then let's do 10. So now you notice that it's going all the way up to 10. If we did not want to start from 0, then we'll just change our value here from being 0 to a value of 1. And let's clear the screen and run the code here and do 10. Now, as you can see, this basically ran from 1 through 10. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any error checking set in place, meaning this. Let me clear the screen and let's run the code. And let's say that we did 30. Well, it printed out 1 through 30. So the program is not checking to see if that value is going to be less than 30. So let's go ahead and make this code slightly better and look at this step for problem number 2. We're going to start out something similar to the previous one, so everything will more or less look the same. So create a number here. We'll just start out at 1. We'll prompt the user to enter a number. So same syntax as before. And now what we're doing is we're adding one more statement over here that is going to check if the number fits the criteria. And the way we achieve this is we created a while loop. While max num is greater than 20, incorrect value, your number is greater than 20, then we're going to prompt the user again to enter a number that's going to be less than 20. So this will continue long as the condition is going to be true. Once the user enters a value that's less than 20, then it will exit out, and then we'll continue on with the loop. And down below here, the rest of the code would be the same. So we have our print statement, and then we'll have our final statement on here that the loop has completed, and have a great day. And now let's go back and run the code. So let me clear the screen so we can see what's going on with part 2. So let's run. So this one here, let's do 2. So for problem number 2, enter a number less than 20. So if we did 99, incorrect value, 77, 66. So it's going to keep on doing that until we enter a value that's less than 20. So we'll do 19, and then it prints out. So we do have the ability to do various types of error checking. Now, one thing that is still not going to work right, so let's go ahead and clear the screen and run the code again. So do 3. What about if the user decides not to enter a number and enter a string of some sort? And this is where it errors out. So next week we'll go into utilizing some methods to make sure that the number falls in that particular criteria that we're looking for, and they don't enter anything else. So it's going to be definitely an integer value. So that's how we end up doing this particular lab.